scientifically based, it is incredibly researched, and it's really easy to read. He wrote it for us, the general average person, and he's a doctor, that talks about the connection between disease and dairy. You can actually turn on and off cancer genes with the introduction of the main protein in milk, casein. Turn it on and off, and they did it in the lab, but it's much more extensive than that. And me personally, this isn't one of the books that we're giving away today, but this is the book, the single book that changed my life. And if I could meet one person on this earth right now, it would be the author of this book. His name is John Robbins. John Robbins is the heir to Baskin-Robbins, the Baskin-Robbins chain of ice cream stores that you see in the big cities, and he walked away from it all. He walked away from it all because he saw what ice cream actually did to his family members, the amount of dairy that they ate and how sick they got. But this book, even though it's older, they have a new edition that just came out this last year, it's updated, but this is an incredible book. Again, very easy to read and lays out very nicely about a plant-based lifestyle. And if any of you are interested, I do have these DVDs up here. You can just take them and then pass them amongst yourselves. This is called Eating. I don't know if you've seen this, Terry Lee. This is an incredible, incredible DVD that, again, I think of anyone out there. Food Inc. is good. Someone mentioned that. Forks Over Knives is excellent. This one right here is pretty heavy hitting. Not graphic, I don't mean that, but it really shows the connection between health, disease, and the way that we eat. I would like to end with just some very basic things up here. You can see that I have, this is called tofutti cream cheese. It's a cream cheese substitute. This is Vegenaise, which is actually a vegan mayo. Also, there is sour cream up here that's called Sour Supreme. That's an alternative. This is Earth Balance. Earth Balance, you can bake with it, cook with it, fry with it. It's non-hydrogenated margarine. It's also gluten-free. It's dairy-free. This is a really good option for baking, cooking, frying to have in your diet. And then also, people say, well, what about roasts and all of that? This right here is called field roast, and it's actually made with wheat protein. This one happens to be stuffed with cranberries. So this would be something that you could put in the center of the table for a Thanksgiving meal. What you'll find is that once you follow a vegan lifestyle for any amount of time, you don't really crave a lot of these alternatives, you just simply make other dishes. But during the transition period, when people in your family or even yourself, you're kind of craving those foods that you're used to, something like a roast in the center of the table might be a way for you to go. And then Terry Lee brought this. This is nutritional yeast. What a weird thing when you think nutritional yeast, that sounds yucky. It's not like baking yeast. Nutritional yeast is actually grown on molasses. And so it is high in B vitamins, and it's used as a flavoring. And so if you have, most people start with popcorn. So if you like popcorn, I love popcorn. We're popcorn addicts. We're self-proclaimed popcorn addicts. You can sprinkle this on there, and it kind of has a cheesy, buttery flavor that's really tasty. You can also take a baked potato, sprinkle it on a baked potato or on vegetables, add it to soups, stews, casseroles. It just kind of adds just an extra bit of flavor and creaminess and depth to whatever it is that you're making. And I'm not sure, Terry Lee, where'd you get this? The nutritional yeast.
I ordered that from Amazon.
Okay, she ordered it from Amazon. You can also get it at the Marquette Food Co-op. You can get it through health food stores oftentimes. Don't get brewer's yeast. Some people will tell you it's the same. It's not the same. So nutritional yeast, not brewer's yeast. Brewer's yeast is something left over from the brewing process. This is something that's actually grown on molasses. Two different things completely.
That has B12 in it too.
It what?
It has B12 in it.
And this one has B12. And if someone tries to sell you nutritional yeast that's in a clear container and tell you that it has B12 in it, don't listen. B12 is photodegrading, which means that light degrades the amount of B12 in it. So if, let's say it's in your brochure's case, and it's sitting there and it's a clear plastic and it has light coming in the glass, and it says, contains lots of B12, it won't, because over time it depletes because of the light. Just so you know. But these, again, are transition foods that if you're like, okay, I always make this wonderful cream cheese spread to put on my sandwiches. What am I going to use? Well, this would be something that you could start using. It doesn't contain any dairy, doesn't have any cholesterol in it, so this might be an option for you. And then over time, just eat other things and not have to center always trying to be something that I don't really want to eat. So, I don't know, Terry, if that covered a lot of the things that you were interested in, or if I have forgotten specific things. Can you think of anything? But I'd love to open it up to questions. If any of you have questions, I know people are probably hungry at this point in time. Yes, ma'am.
Eggs, why not eggs?
Thank you for asking that question. I went through this myself personally.
What was the
eggs? She said, well, why not eggs? You know, what's wrong with eggs? Because a lot of us are learning that eggs from the store aren't the same as the eggs that might be grown in our backyards or whatever, and those are much higher in vitamins, minerals, and all the good things. So why not eggs? Now, I know for me, I was vegetarian for years, and I had my own chickens. And I had my own chickens because I read somewhere that chickens in confinement, their feet actually can grow to the bottom of the cage, and they actually have to cut their legs off. And I read that, and I thought, oh my gosh, that can't be real. The further I looked into it, the more I learned about that. And so I said, I don't want to do that. I want to have my own chickens. So my ex-husband and I, we got our own chickens, and we ate our eggs from our own chickens for the longest time, even though we were vegan as well. But then it comes down to a personal choice. But there's still cholesterol in eggs. And there are still other things in eggs that aren't inherently healthy, and you don't need them. That's the bottom line. You don't need them. So if you're going to raise your own chickens, that's probably the best way to do it. Not everybody can raise their own chickens. If everyone was trying to raise their own chickens, we'd have waste management problems. We'd have all sorts of problems when it comes to that. Additionally, if you're not going to raise your own chickens and not buy them from someone locally, then you're contributing to a system that keeps chickens in the dark 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and actually gives them more space than one sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11.
And that's for the cage-free and organic?
Now here's the thing, thank you, your questions are great. Cage-free, so many people go into the store and they say, oh, I've heard about those horrible confinement cages, and I'm gonna purchase cage-free. Picture a whole building, similar to this church, except picture it 5 times as long. That's gonna be very similar to a shed these chickens live in, except half the height. Now, when you do that, imagine that it is just row after row after row of cages. And these cages are stacked from the bottom all the way up to the top. So the ones on the top are going to the bathrooms on the one down below, and so on and so on. Now, all of a sudden, I come in there and go, poof, no more cages. Now, all those birds that were in the cages are on the floor of that building. Beak to beak, tail to tail, still can't move around, but they're cage-free. So again, it is a step in the right direction because they're not where they can't even move their wings, but they're still cheek by jowl with their friends and neighbors. And then when it says access to pasture raised, that means that there could be a door, like that front door right there, for 500,000 chickens. The chicken that's way down there has to climb over everybody to go out in the little pen outside. So there are some real challenges to the regulations right now, and you mentioned organic. So buy organic. I can tell you, my mom can tell you the same thing. 2 years ago, I was in Madison, Wisconsin in November because the National Organic Standards Board, they're responsible for organic food production. We're hearing testimony on the access to pasture rule for poultry, and that's what I did. I gave testimony on the access to pasture rule because what's happening right now, and it's gotten much better, is that's how producers were getting around it. They were feeding organic feed, but the access to pasture was just simply one little door with access to pasture. Not that they had to actually be able to get into it, but they did have access to pasture. Your best bet still is to go with an organic, certified organic label because it's going to not have pesticides, herbicides, and things like that in the feed of the chickens. And for the most part, most organic producers are going to provide some access to pasture that's true access for people. But there's so much going on with chickens right now, and if we don't need it, and this, I guess this is the biggest part of it, if we don't need animal products to exist, why would we raise an animal simply to take its life to feed us when you don't really need it? So from a vegan perspective of do as little harm as possible and leave lighter footprints on the earth, that would be why a person would choose not to have the eggs. Also in a factory farming situation, they do force molt the chickens, so they will actually starve them. And take away their water for a week at a time, because the chickens generally molt once or twice a year. They lose all their feathers. It's their downtime while their bodies replenish, and they don't allow them to do that because they're not making money for them. So they'll take away food and water, and then they never molt, and so it kicks in a new cycle for them. So again, it's if people only have access to eggs at the store that aren't cage-free or any of those things, then they may not want to contribute to that type of system. I don't know, does that kind of answer your question? Yes.
The egg replacers work really well. Like my son can't take it, and I started using flaxseed. A quarter cup of flaxseed, drained it for 1 egg, and it finds everything.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's packaged egg replacers that you can buy out there, not to make scrambled eggs with, but to bake with. And that alternative sheet I gave you did have the flax listed on there too. Yeah, that's a great one. Plus, then you get your flax too. Yes, ma'am.
Did you mention which 2 restaurants in Marquette?
Oh,
have those?
Sweetwater.
the Sweetwater has vegan options, yummy. Also the Border Grill, which is more of the fast food Mexican. But just so you all know, up until 2 years ago, they never owned a can opener in that store. They do everything from scratch. The only reason they had to get a can opener was because when all the tomatoes froze in Mexico, they could and had to use canned tomatoes. My friend owns that restaurant.
What was the name of the first one?
The Sweetwater Cafe on 3rd Street, they have vegan options. And then the Thai House Bistro, it's on Front Street.
Wait a minute, you're going too fast.
Sorry, Sweetwater Cafe,
Cafe,
and then Border Grill.
got that.
There's one in Nagani, and there's 2 in Marquette for Border Grill. And then Thai Bistro, Thai, T-H, and it's called Sayua. And it's S-A-I-U-W-A.
This comes from the library.
Yeah. And they have a completely separate vegan menu, but you can say, we're need a separate vegan
The
menu.
restaurant is called,
Sayua, but it's the Thai, or it's not the Thai house, it's the Thai bistro. And then also in the basement of the Peter White Public Library, there is 2 Caluthia Cafe. If you go to the library, just walk upstairs, there's only 1 cafe, but it's wonderful, and she does vegan food as well. Yep, she'll do gluten-free too, so she understands allergies. She's a friend of mine.
We should take on all this gluten. People are getting sensitive to gluten, because my daughter feels so much better going
Well,
gluten-free.
I am gluten-free.
Asthma is clearing up.
Yep.
She's gotten off of Advair.
Yep, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I have been gluten-free. When I told you about all the food sensitivities that I had, that was the big one for me. It was I had to cut out wheat and I had to cut out all gluten. Gluten is in rye and barley, spelt, wheat, kamut, all of those different grains. And so the reason that you can't have gluten, it's any number of symptoms. It can be, for me, it was achy joints, fuzzy thinking. You can have skin rashes. You can have severe digestive problems, and usually it's called irritable bowel syndrome because they don't know what to call it. There are so many people out there that are misdiagnosed who are actually gluten intolerant. There was a woman who came into the Marquette Food Co-op that I would just, it just makes me angry. She was in her 80s, and she had suffered from arthritis so bad, crippling arthritis pain. 2 weeks of being on a gluten-free diet, and her pain went away. She had been dealing with that for 30-some years. If someone had told her that 30 years ago, think what that would have done to change her life. I know that it changed my life immensely going gluten-free. Now, if you don't need to be gluten-free, like if wheat and other stuff doesn't bother you, there's no benefit to going gluten-free. It's not a fad, it's not gonna make you feel better. It's only if you really have problems with gluten that you're going to benefit from it. I actually teach the gluten-free workshop at the co-op. It's the first Monday of every month. And so people come in, we teach about converting recipes, we talk about all sorts of things like cross-contamination issues in restaurants, and then I walk everybody through the store and we go through very specific products that you can have if you're gluten-free. So, but if any of you have symptoms like, every single time you eat that you're doubled over because your stomach hurts, or you're so bloated and you have gas and you can't digest things, that might be a sign that you're gluten intolerant. There is 2 tests that you can take. One is a blood test. The second one is a biopsy of your intestine. And then you will be able to tell if you are celiac. Celiac is the disease associated with it. And then you can also be gluten intolerant, which is a little lesser of a reaction. So does that kind of, and why? Here's why. because our food supply has changed so much over time. And you had asked about genetically modified organisms. I don't want to get into all this right now, but genetically modified organisms, if you are eating processed packaged food in the store, anything from crackers, cookies, cereal, all of that, over 90% of any soy that's on a package, like soy lecithin, is genetically modified. Corn is another one that's genetically modified. If it says canola, it's genetically modified. And what does genetically modified mean? It's not like plant breeding. So let's say you're a gardener and you have wonderful, wonderful tomato plants that you're like, wow, I'd like to grow these out again next year. You might breed those together to get something better. Or let's say you have 2 Labrador retrievers that you think these are the best